Yes, this is Dan Davis. Welcome to the Financial Planning World community. Glad you're joining us today in our best practice series. What our intention is to bring practices throughout the US to you so that from your computer in your house, your office, that you can advance your practice. Today, I'm joined by what I think is a very impressive team, Dave and Austin Boniface. They're based up in the north, and I think what you're going to really love is the concept of sticky assets through vertical planning. When I first heard it, I had never heard of the concept. And when David and I spent some time talking about it, I was really blown away and wanted to share it with you. So with that, Dave, why don't you kind of talk to him big picture about vertical planning, and we'll sort of roll from there.
Absolutely. So Austin's my son. I brought him on like about 3-4 years ago now, and we've created this thing around what we call vertical planning, which is really more of just a generational planning. And what we've done is we've built narratives around of our clients. We've moved the client relationship away from just being the client to being the entire family. And what kind of led up to that was a couple of events. We had a client pass away a year ago, last Labor Day a year ago. And, we realized that we pretty much had everything in order, and we started working with the entire family and the kids. It just made things a lot smoother. Later in the year, though, we had a client call us and said that, his mother wasn't going to make it through the weekend, and that the power of attorney was in fact his deceased brother, and there was no contingent. So we had to struggle very, very rapidly, quickly, to find an attorney that could fill in a POA rapidly so we could deal with everything. That got us moving towards this idea that instead of just dealing with the client as the client, let's take the whole family on as a client. So when we present to a higher net worth client, we drive that home. The entire family is our client, not just the individual. People with wealth, it's very, very important to them that their kids are taken care of and that their anxiety is reduced. So we usually give an opportunity to meet with the kids. We ask to meet with the kids. We're not really selling anything. It's more of, when it becomes time for them to enroll in their 401k, should they be doing Roth? Should they be doing traditional? How about HSAs? How about insurances? All these different things that young people don't have a good chance to really figure out, because there's not the education sometimes that there used to be. The other thing we bring up, of course, that is even more powerful, is we also ask the client, are you a power of attorney for anybody else? Are you on a healthcare directive? Are you a personal representative or a trustee for somebody else? If that's the case, do you know what your role is in the event that something happens to that person? And more often than not, they're not that well prepared. So we offer to take their documents and vault them if they would like. We review, for payable on deaths, transfer on deaths, all of those types of documents. If there's a trust, we make sure that everything is in good order and things are properly titled. And we do this just as a service to our client. Of course, what we found is that when an event happens, or even sometimes just in the review, we end up bringing on more assets that way. We frame ourselves as we are your family's financial advisor, not you as an individual. And we found that's just been incredibly, incredibly powerful.
That's huge.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's nice to build relationships with the kids before something bad happens to your client, right? We've had a couple cases where, client passes away and the kids have to call us. And the first time they're talking to their parents' advisor is, a couple days after they lost their parents. That's not a fun conversation. So building out that relationship before the inevitable or the terrible thing happens goes a long way for both, the kids' confidence, as well as having, the parent know that their kids are going to be in good hands and their kids are going to be taken care of. And another thing we found through doing this is, kids talk. The kids talk to their siblings. The kids talk to their cousins. You get a kid and their cousin going to Thanksgiving together, and they're in their mid-20s and they're talking about their Robinhood accounts. And, one of the kids says, "Oh, I use my parents' advisor." Also, your parents use that same advisor. And now all of a sudden we're going vertical and horizontally through different different families, and it's worked really well for us, and it's been a good addition to our process.
Yeah, we have one.
Let me ask a couple questions, Dave. So when you guys think about like a CRM or we call it e-notes, like the soft notes used behind the scenes, how do you guys document this stuff so that you actually know what's going on when you come back to it in 6 months?
Would you talk about the narrative?
Yeah, so we use Redtail as our CRM, but another thing we've added recently is what we call our client or our family narratives. And Dave's been doing this for a lot longer than I have, obviously. So one of the problems we had when I was getting onboarded and starting to do more was I didn't necessarily know the clients all that well. So what we did was we created these family narratives that have, they usually end up being about six to 8 pages on a Word document, and they live in the client's CRMs, in their Wealth Vision vaults, and in our server. And basically it just goes into where did the client come from, who are the client's relatives, maybe a paragraph or two about each of the relatives, whether we work with them or not. And then a lot of that, kind of qualitative soft data you pull out of client conversations, we've been putting in there. Dave's done a really good job at remembering different stories, different life events that clients have told him about that we've now recorded in there. So, now if a client calls and I answer the phone and I have to talk to him, I can bring up that big life event that happened to him in 2006, and talk to them a little bit about that. And that's made them more comfortable with me, and also me more comfortable talking to them. And it's done a lot for us to keep track of those family relationships. Every time before we do a review call, we're opening that document and reading it over, so everything's fresh on our mind.
Man, that's super cool, guys. We're right in the middle of acquiring another practice and getting that download of the narrative from the advisor. It's interesting because I'll have other people in that person's practice, and he knows pieces of the narrative that the advisor doesn't know, and the advisor knows, so that they've not actually documented that narrative like that. So as I'm listening to what you're talking about, I can tell you I'm going to implement that in our practice as well. We have this thing that we learned from Peak back in the day of love affair marketing, of those key points, but it's such a cliff note version compared to the sort of the full Monty of really getting that narrative. Do either of you remember Harvey McKay? He was up in Minneapolis back in the day. He wrote a book called How to Swim with the Sharks Without Getting Eaten Alive.
Mm-hmm.
And the key thing he said is know your customer, and you'll never worry about margins, because if they know that you know them deeply and care about them, they're not going to go anywhere else. And if you don't know them deeply, then you should be concerned, because when the next person comes with something that's better or cheaper, you're going to lose.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Anything else that you guys would sort of, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and of course, the other thing and this has actually happened to us a few times, the family gets together, and the primary son has a conversation and says, by the way, we met with our financial advisor, and he spent a little bit of time wondering about mom and dad and making sure everything is in order. Do you guys know if everything's in order with mom and dad? Do you know where all the documents are? And that ends up the whole family, the brothers and sisters. We actually had a decent relationship. We did that with, and lo and behold, what ends up happening is, the brother and sister-in-law come and see us, and they were substantially larger than the people we were working with. So it compounds pretty quickly. It's exponential. It gets your name exponentially in front of people.
Right on. When I came into business back in the 80s, I have to admit that I was motivated to come because of how much money one could make doing this. But what's really hit my buttons is those deep relationships that you form with people. And I think that what you guys are doing deepens that relationship, because it takes it to not just the husband and wife, but way beyond that. So you have the deep relationship with the family and not just the customer. Austin, you had mentioned earlier what you thought that meant about client retention. Could you speak to that? But
Yeah.
before you do that, is there anything you guys want to wrap up with before that point?
No. Yeah, for us, you hear all these horror stories and all these, not necessarily horror stories, but all these, seminars at conferences and things like that about how to retain assets. And I can't think of a better way to retain assets than just going out there and being a good person to your clients' kids and your clients' family. I'm not nervous at all about when our clients pass away, whether we're going to retain the assets or not. I'm 99.9% confident in all of our relationships that, the kids are already working with us. They're not going to see another advisor. They're already onboarded in our systems, and they hear from us once or twice a year. And we don't really need to charge for that, because it's not, most of the time the type of advice those kids need is pretty straightforward and simple, and takes 5 to 10 minutes to answer. So when their parents do pass, it's not like they're going to go anywhere else. They're legacy capital clients, and they will be probably for their life, and hopefully their kids become our clients as well.
Yeah, there was a point in time in our practice, and it was probably in the early 2000s, where we mistakenly started to focus exclusively on accounts that were above a certain size. And then we didn't have flexibility to work with the kids below. We were way too myopic on what I would just classify as AUM. And literally what was the epiphany for me was, Austin, I had a few clients die, and the money just went out the door.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me, if I was the kid and that was the first time I was meeting the advisor, and I already had someone who was helping me when I had nothing, why would I keep the money with that advisor? So you really do have to sow the seeds with the family in order to keep those assets when the legacy transitions wealth and the baton's handed off. So I think what you guys are doing is absolutely spectacular, and I can tell you that we're going to implement much of that in our office as well. And so this is, to the financial planning world community, this is why we're sharing this with you, is we think that what's happened in my office is probably similar to what's happened in many others' offices. And if we can do a better job of being vertical and the horizontal component, I do think that the viability long-term of the advice is improved, the quality of AUM stickiness is improved. And then I think that we'll just enjoy it as even significantly better, because it's all about relationships. So anything else you guys want to say before I sign us off?
No,
I think that's good. I appreciate this very much, Dan. I appreciate the opportunity and what you're doing for the community, because there's a lot of not so good practice advice, and I appreciate you giving the advice that leads to better outcomes. So
well,
thank
Dave
you
and
for
Austin,
that.
you're very, very welcome. I appreciate you guys willing to invest your time with no return coming back to you, other than just to do what I think is right, which is helping the community to get better advice. Because if we do that, it's really my belief that's what's going to happen is more and more scale is going to continue to affect our industry, not just at the custodial level, but at the practice level. And practices like ours it's going to be harder and harder to be able to compete if we're commoditized. But if we do a great job of quality, there's a book that Bo Boykman put out, and it's called The Small Giant. And then the small giant, it's how do you give a competitive business the ability to conquer things in the midst of scale defeating a lot. So what you guys are doing will help us do that. So from financial planning world, from Nashville, now you guys are up in like the Minneapolis Twin City area. Whereabouts in Minneapolis?
North suburbs, Forest Lake, Minnesota. So
Forest Lake. Yeah. So
30 minutes north.
From Nashville to Minneapolis to wherever you're at, we're signing off. Thanks for your time today.
Hey, thank you, Dan. Bye.